Good morning. New dog learning old tricks, staring at my computer as if it's an audience. Bear with me. I'll assume I've been introduced. Hi everyone, I'm Leslie Quinn. I work for Xanterra Parks and Resorts. When we are training tour guides, I'm the trainer of the tour guides. The pandemic has altered our touring scheme, as I know it has many of yours. And you may have been told that I was going to talk about park history today. It's what I usually talk about. I did suggest that I would like to talk about themes for park tours. I was given permission to do so, so that is what I'm going to chat about today. But if you thought I was going to talk about park history, I've included a little, like the fact that Lewis Brothers, their bus company isn't around anymore, and it really doesn't have anything to do with what's on the screen right now, but we'll be hoping that none of you end up with your bus like Lewis Brothers here. By the way, no injuries here, and the bus was even salvaged without it ever quite tipping over. Themes for park tours. Why have a theme on a park tour? Our tours should have themes. That's the theme of my presentation today. Many people, when I first broach the subject with them of having a theme for your park tour, they're very trepidatious. They say, I don't want to talk about one thing all day. And I'm not asking you to. If you're doing an all-day tour, 6, 8, 10 hours, your theme will take up about 15 minutes of the whole day and no more. Or it could take a little more if you want it to, but it doesn't have to take any more. You can have a solid theme with about 15 minutes of the entire tour related to it, dedicated to it. Many of us have seen the kind of themes that the National Park Service has at their programs. They have themes about volcanoes, birds. I've even been to programs where the theme was about poop. And that's great. For us, touring all around the park, all day long, our themes are going to be painted with a lot broader brush. Bear with me, and we'll dive in and see what I'm talking about. This slide, why have a theme? Well, yeah, why have a theme on your tour? But here's another bit of history. You just don't see a lot of big buses at Firehole Falls anymore. We should have a theme because it will help us organize our tours. Here's a sunrise shot of Yellowstone Lake. It's a really nice place to talk about the lake trout crisis, Yellowstone Lake. Doesn't have to be sunrise. It's not such a great place to talk about thermal features. There are some at the West Thumb Geyser Basin, yes, but overall, most of us will tour the big geyser basins, and that's where we talk about thermal features, more so than driving along the lakeshore. This is not a great place to talk about Yellowstone Lake, but this is a great place to talk about fire ecology. So you want your tour to be organized, and a theme will help you do that. If you don't have any kind of organization to your tour, if all your tour is reacting to what you see along the roadside, oh, there's an elk, oh, look, there's a geyser, your tour will drop into being what some of us refer to as a point-and-shoot tour, like these old cameras were advertised. It's not that a point-and-shoot tour is horrible, it's not rising to be the best that it could be. So you want to try to avoid just reacting to what you see and have your tours being a point-and-shoot tour. You want to organize them somehow. Another good reason to have a theme is that every tour will have a message, whether you want it to or not. Your passengers will take a message away from your tours. Now, our intrepid guide, in this instance, is putting forth a message that he's not intending, but that's the one his two guests there are going to take away. You'd like yours to be a little more cohesive. You'd like it to be one that you plan. A theme will help you do that. Themes are messages. So here are some things about a theme that it's always worth remembering. A theme should be a complete sentence. The biggest reason why is it forces you to do a better job deciding what you really want to talk about. A theme should express just one idea. I've had folks come to me with a theme they wanted to use that was almost a paragraph long, and there's just no way your guests are going to be able to pick up on that. A good solid one single idea is what you want. Short, powerful is better. That takes some work and it takes some practice, but we get the whole summer to practice. It's the great thing about it. And a theme connects tangibles to intangibles. Where's he going there? Bear with me. We'll talk about those. But overall, tangibles are those things that you can touch, look straight at, see them. And intangibles are things you can't, but that are worthwhile. Just as a quick one, love's an intangible. It's hard to put a finger on it, but we all know what it is. And I'm not saying that that should be the one on your tour, but it might be. So from there, how do I actually create? How do I use a theme? Well, on we go. Let's talk about that. For starters, you want to know about some resources. Now, the first resource I'm showing here actually has to do with the first theme that I'm going to show you an example of. But for anybody who's guiding in Yellowstone for any length of time, Paul Schileri's book, Mountain Time, consider it a must-read. Consider it one that will make you a better guide whether or not you ever use a theme on your tour. Mountain Time is one of the best books ever written about the park. Pick it up. Freeman Tilden's Interpreting Our Heritage is a Bible of why, if you're sharing information about any place, why you want to do it well and how to do it well, although Freeman Tilden didn't really talk about themes. Sam Hamm's Interpretation Making a Difference on Purpose is a very modern day, important and valuable work to have on your shelf. It's a larger book. It'll take you time to read through it. It will make you a better guide in so many ways, one of which is that Sam Hamm has a really tried and true and great method for how to build a theme that I'll cover with you very briefly here. You can get it in better detail in his book. Here's Sam Hamm's step-by-step method of how to create a theme. I'll be using an example here that's a little narrower than one we might do on an all-day park tour, just for the sake of example. Bear with me. First of all, you'd want to pick a topic in some way of somehow what you want to talk about. So as an example, we'll say you pick forest fire ecology, that it jazzes you and you want to talk about that. You narrow that because you want to decide what is it about forest fire ecology you really want to say. Perhaps for you it could be that forest fires have both positive and negative effects for the forest. Close enough. Finally, make a decision. As it says on the screen, you want to decide how you're going to finish the statement that at the end of your tour, more than anything else, you're hoping that your passengers understand that. Now, if you consider how that's worded, you have to follow that with a complete sentence. For you, it might be that fire is a foe and a friend to the forest. That's getting people's gears to turn in ways they might not. Most people just think that fire is bad for the forest. You suggesting it's a foe and a friend gets them thinking, gets them a message that's worth having because they're going to think about it a little bit. That's Sam Hamm's method of how to create a theme. So the one that I want to first give you as a nice example of a great theme for an all-day park tour is this. In Yellowstone, the resource is wildness. And I'm going to give a nod to my late friend, the great Mike Yoakum, wonderful tour guide in Yellowstone, wonderful park ranger, wonderful writer. He passed away last year. He was the first one I ever heard use this theme on a park tour. So I just wanted to give him a big thanks. And why he's holding a toilet plunger, I have no idea. So in Yellowstone, the resource is wildness. Here's our tiny bit of history. You don't see a lot of park buses down by Grotto Geyser these days. That picture's from 2004 for the Old Faithful Inn Centennial when they let us use the road down to Morning Glory and back for some of the antique buses. In any case, introducing your theme. You want to, during the introduction to your tour, most of us give an introduction to our tour. We show a map, we outline our route for the day, we talk about where lunch will be, that there'll be plenty of restrooms, where some of our stops might be, and you'll still do that. And near the end of your introduction, you'll add on introducing your theme. In this case, it would be something along the lines of, folks, I also want to talk a little bit today on our tour about park resources. Many of us would think of our great forests, our thermal features, our bodies of water, all of our wildlife as incredible resources, and I'm not saying they aren't, but I also want you to consider the possibility that something as intangible as the wild nature of all things, the wildness, might be a resource here. And I'll let you know, for a lot of us, we not only do think it's a resource here, we actually think it's the only one the park has. We'll talk about that as we go along. There, in about a minute, I introduce my theme. You'll do that when you're using one. Then during the day, you're going to have some theme supports. 3, 5, somewhere in there. Obviously, some elk standing in the river while the forest burns behind them. During the day, when you talk about fire ecology, when folks see forests that have burned and perhaps been regrowing and you decide to talk about that, somewhere in your discussion of fire ecology, you might mention that if, here in Yellowstone, if our trees are the resource, you could make a valid argument that the National Park Service did a bad job taking care of that resource when they've allowed fires to burn. On the other hand, if it's the wild nature of the forests that is the resource, that is what we want to preserve, when lightning, which is natural itself, strikes a forest, if you put that fire out, you're destroying the only thing about the forest you wanted to preserve, its wild nature. That might be why we don't always fight fires in our forests. At thermal features, here's Fountain Geyser erupting with black smoke from the 1988 fires behind it, a little more history thrown in there. When you're walking the fountain paint pots, you could mention to everyone that here in Yellowstone, we don't have any bathhouses around our thermal features, and some of you I know find that intriguing that we don't use them in any way. Because at other national parks, for instance, Hot Springs National Park in Arkansas, their hot springs are the resource. They have bathhouses built over them, and they let you soak in the hot water. Here in Yellowstone, the wild nature of the hot springs, their wildness, is the resource. So no bathhouses. Both of these two theme supports have only taken a minute each, again, towards the fact that it's about 15 minutes of your whole tour that your theme takes up. More, watching wild animals, someone might ask, or you might bring up, of the fact that we never feed them in the wintertime. While it might help the animals get through the winter, you can first be practical and mention that, oh yes, if you've got 5,000 starving elk and you feed them this winter, next winter you'll have 15,000 starving elk to feed. That's merely practical. You could also mention that for millennia upon millennia, our elk, our bison, our wild animals have survived on their own in the wintertime. If we feed them, we are compromising the wild nature of those creatures, that now they're dependent on humans for food. So again, we're compromising the wildness of the park. That's why we don't do it. It's also nice to have back pocket theme supports, ones you really keep back there just for when someone asks. Now, here's a fire break carved through the wilderness. I'm not sure, but I think it was carved right along the park border back in 1988. I might be mistaken. In any case, some were. And that brings up the entire idea of the fact that national forests are very different areas than national parks. And you'd be surprised how many of our passengers every summer have never given that much thought on the difference between national forests and national parks. National forests are lands of many uses, as they say on their signs. They do use the resources there. If you like reading a newspaper or a book, if you appreciate having paper around, then you have to be okay with wise, intelligent timber harvesting. That's where we get books and paper from. And a lot of that is done on national forest land. National parks are more reserved as vignettes of primitive America. In national parks, wildness is the resource, so we don't allow those kind of things. Neither area is bad. They are different use areas. They're both good. They're different. It's a theme support for your tour. You could have one because you might get a question from someone who doesn't like wolves as to why not remove them and just let humans do the hunting in the park. So there, there's a whole list of reasons of why you can discuss that, of all the ins and outs of it, that would take far too long in my presentation. But, of course, wild wolves hunting elk, bison, preserves the park's wildness, where humans doing it all would not be considered to really be part of the wildness of everything. So again, a back pocket theme support. During the day, you'll give some supports to your theme so that your passengers will get to know your message, and then at the end, you'll want to conclude your tour. I won't read this whole quote. I'll let you read it while I chat about the fact that Paul Schilleri, the author I mentioned before, he was giving a talk for rangers in training one day, close to 40 years ago now. And one of the other speakers that day was the park's plant biologist, Don Despain. Don's long retired now, but Paul heard Don say that about Yellowstone that you see in the quote right there. And Paul included it in his book, Mountain Time, on page 71. That quote is what you can build your conclusion around. You can mention how you've been talking about park resources all day, and the reason you got the idea to was from Don Despain, because this is what he said about Yellowstone, one of the most eloquent things ever said about the park. When you provide that quote, yes, you'll have to do the work to memorize it, but when you do, you will help your passengers make both an intellectual and emotional connection to Yellowstone, and you'll have served them very well by doing so, which is what we'd like to do with our tours. This is why having a theme with a solid message makes a better tour than if you're just doing point and shoot. Another possible theme that many guides have used to great effect, that Yellowstone may be thought of as a big jigsaw puzzle, and on our tour today, we'll see if we can fit a few pieces of the puzzle in place. This allows you to have theme supports that generate around when scientists do their research here. All they're trying to do is put some of the pieces in place. And have fun with this tour theme if you decide to use it. That there was a time when there were a lot of pieces to the puzzle that were all sooty and covered in black, and no one wanted to touch them because it was obvious they had been burned in a forest fire. When finally someone was willing to get their hands a little dirty, they realized that these black sooty pieces made up the frame, that Yellowstone Park is framed by a history of fire ecology and a history of large forest fires in our forests. You could also talk about how the table that we're building our entire puzzle on is the massive caldera underneath the park, that volcano not only defines the entire park, every now and then it blows the puzzle to bits and all the pieces have to land in a different fashion. You could also use the theme support that Hunter Key used on his tour the day that I rode with him. Hunter doesn't work here right now. Great tour guide, off raising a family, doing other things. When I was riding Hunter's tour, shortly after wolves had been reestablished here, in talking about wolves and their value to the ecosystem, Hunter mentioned that when those wolves pulled down that very first elk, that loud snap we heard was not that poor elk's that poor elk's neck breaking. It was an enormous piece of the puzzle slamming back into place. It was a defining moment of the tour. It woke everybody up and got all their gears turning, which is what we want to do with our touring. Another nice theme to use, Yellowstone is a book with many chapters. And today we're going to open and read from chapters on geography, geology, flora, fauna, human history. It allows you a lot of leeway in that you're talking about all the things you talked about, and all you have to do is mention that, let's open that chapter on geology right now while we visit these thermal features. Let's open this chapter on wildlife while we watch these bison in the field. And that turns those things into easy theme supports. My great friend Patrick Matheny was the first one I ever heard use this theme, and in his conclusion, Patrick would wrap it around the fact that each of us has a chapter in the book of Yellowstone, but we get to decide how that chapter will be. Long or short, trivial or in depth, it's up to each of us to decide what our chapter in the book of Yellowstone is going to be all about. That makes an emotional connection for your passengers. it lets them decide what Yellowstone will ever mean to them. So there's some themes you can use. I'm going to touch really momentarily on goals and objectives. Lofty goals that we might have. We might have a lofty goal like that my passengers will fall in love in Yellowstone. Our employer might have an objective for our tour. Objectives are concrete, along the lines that within 3 days of riding it, that some of your passengers, however many, that overall there'll be positive comments made on your company's Facebook page about your tour. Well, if that objective ends up being met, that's better for your employment. So some of the background basics that go along with themes and such, this is some of the nitty-gritty. Don't worry too much about it, but they can help your employment status and how well you're touring as well. And of course, there's another way, a good solid theme. If it makes a better tour for you, there are other ways it might help you as well, and we all know about those. There's nothing wrong with those either. That's most of what I wanted to talk to you about to you today. If some of this is intriguing you, I learned all about using themes on tours from the National Association for Interpretation. There are a number of us around here who teach classes whereby you can become a certified interpretive guide through NAI. It's the great nationwide organization that supports all of us who are trying to interpret well in our various areas, so you might consider checking them out. And I'm always open for questions as well. My email address is here on the screen. And a last little history picture, another place you just don't see a lot of buses these days is in along Firehole Lake Drive. That's Great Fountain Geyser in the background, and just off to the right of the picture is White Dome Geyser. Don't see a lot of big buses back here anymore, but I hope we will again someday when we get those bridges rebuilt. Thank you all very much, and although I don't know the protocol yet, still an old dog learning new tricks, I guess we have some question and answer time now that I might, if we work the technology out, be available for live chat with answering of questions. Thank you all so very much for listening to me today.